Hello and welcome to another scene for the Living World of Darkness, Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition venue set in the Kingdom of Apples. Today's scene takes place in Karnar, specifically the library, where one resident of New York City, or the County of New Hope, makes his way to this font of knowledge.
Charles is approaching the library doors. It's at this point, it's not even necessarily. I'm sure they still have an escort because they should be escorting their guests anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, he's not so much being led as to the fact that he's just being, he's being made sure he gets to his destination. And now he's wearing two very shiny new pins, chimerical, of course. The real world wouldn't allow them, but now it's the shield bearing the crest of Legion, and just slightly underneath it, in a nice sort of pattern diagonal, is that of his own particular coat of arms. But he makes his way to the gate of Karanar, bearing a letter with the wax seal of Legion upon it.
A very old Boggin sits at the front of the library, smoking a pipe.
Mr. Fezzelwick? I bear tidings from the Count of New Hope.
The fuck does New Hope want?
And Charles holds out the letter. I believe there will be guests coming this Sunday, and the Count wishes to make sure that the Library of Tarnar is prepared to welcome them.
He opens the letter. How many people are coming?
Out of character, I'm sure there's a head count. I don't know it off the top. So, and I will be there for supervision.
Make sure they don't do something stupid like eat the books or rub themselves all over the books.
Well, I'm sure if they tried any such thing, the library would handle itself before I had to get myself involved.
Sort of gives a bit of a squint, pulls down his spectacles, cleans them on his shirt, puts them back on very slowly, steeples his finger under his chin. I don't want the library to have to defend itself. I don't want them to fuck with my books.
As I said, I will be there to supervise, and if any of them start to get a little itchy, maybe me and the books can work together.
All right. And he gives like the dismissive hand gesture, picks up a book that he was reading and gets back to it.
And Charles turns, and he doesn't go to leave. He actually starts to go deeper into the library. Back to a particular area. Seems to be the common meeting area, deep into the depths within this place. And finally, he stops. And he doesn't pick up a book from the shelves, but he reaches into a bag he's carrying with him, and he pulls out a journal with the words Chararis, true friend. I can't remember the second part of it, but
I don't either.
Regardless, he pulls that out. And he flicks through the pages, rustling them, just waiting for the time being before composing himself. Actually, it's a lot easier now to compose himself. Strange. He'd been having so much trouble this entire month dealing with these roller coasters of emotions, but now it's not so much dealing with them anymore. No, it's a different change of perspective now. It's not, emotions aren't things to deal with. Emotions are something to just oddly enough, embrace, even if he doesn't necessarily understand it. But they guide to something else. And when you embrace them, you understand them, and you know how to guide them to greater purpose. And so he closes he starts thumbing through it and whispers to the journal, "Dice."
Roll perception alertness.
Bum, bum, bum. Okay.
I don't know what that was.
Apparently, it doesn't like my shit, Carol.
But no.
But, I mean, it's the correct spacing.
You forgot the one afterwards.
Oh.
You just have a straight fail.
Everything fails! Oh, well, it wasn't a botch. It wasn't a botch. There was 1 8.
Still,
but
you don't hear like right behind you. Somebody puts their hand on your shoulder really abruptly.
Yeah, and Charles sort of starts. Oh, you startled me.
Dice just sort of gives a grin. Gotta stop meeting like this.
Well, I'm glad it was a satisfactory surprise, even though it made me You know, I've never felt surprised like this before. I mean, sometimes something unexpected happens and, you know, I roll with it and stuff, but being actually surprised.
It's a very dull life you're living then.
You know, I hadn't considered that I'd been living something very dull until this all started happening, actually. I finished, he said, as he picks up the journal and he hands it to him. You could read it, or I could talk to you about it. I'm for sure I much prefer talking to you about it.
Oh, well, I mean, I did come unprepared for book club, so you may as well catch me up to speed.
Well, Charles sets the journal onto the book cart of books. I'm assuming they're there, and he sort of leans back and he thinks for a long moment. I'll admit right off the bat that I thought this was some what is it? What's the right word for this? Some Zen master sort of idea of understanding yourself. You have to embrace the unknown. Sort of get back in touch with your own roots, sort of thing. Got to shake things up. And maybe it was. But in some respects, I was only really focused on one, maybe something else. I was expecting more of this to be something for me to remember those words that I used to be able to speak, to understand the true language of the universe, to get back to my old self by experiencing everything else. And to a degree, that was what happened. I did remember. I do remember. And I see myself for what I once was. But I'm not that anymore. And I think, ultimately, what this was to really show me something else. This, me remembering those things and stuff was just a happy accident. as opposed to what this was really about. And it wasn't until the tail end of this whole venture of this month that I really realized that.
So, sounds like a good excerpt for the dust jacket, but care to elaborate?
And Charles sort of nods. I was fascinated. I remember when we first talked about this, I was fascinated by humans, and the things I liked about them was they were more genuine. They felt things more viscerally, everything was a little more real. I was more real. Well, I was not as real as the rest of them, so to speak, and I couldn't understand exactly how the others could balance themselves so well, being what they are, and yet at the same time, at the time, thinking them polluted by this human shell that
That's
they.
a heavy way to think about people.
Sorry, what was that?
That's a heavy way to think about people.
Well, that's what I was thinking. To be honest, I thought of Charles being this prison that I was encased in, this thing in which I would feel my life ebbing away constantly, this constant reminder that of what I once was and now no longer, and that I am doomed to fade away. Actually, speaking of fading away, maybe that's a place to start. It wasn't the beginning of my emotional journey, but it's still something that stood out. There's a knocker in Brooklyn by the name of Maurice. And without getting into the details of the argument, we started having that argument. We started having an argument, and it got cut short. And I began to realize it was because he was having heart palpitations. I had never seen, well, I won't say I'd never seen anything like that. I've seen the elderly before, but I've never seen anything so like that in which they were so fragile. Well, the elderly always seem to be those ones that hold wisdom, hold the knowledge that the youthful don't have. True, maybe they can't get around as well, but they have a strength all their own. I'd never seen anything so frail. But that wasn't the thing that really struck me. And he sort of closes his eyes for a moment as he takes a deep breath for a moment. He's fading. And I don't know how long he has before he becomes undone.
That's something a lot of folks do. They stick around long enough.
I'd never seen it.
How did it make you feel?
I was shocked. I was sad, and yes, I was sad. And for a moment, I wanted to try and stop that from happening. Like watching a rose wither. You want to try to preserve the beauty before it fades away and is taken away. But I think what got me the most, what disturbed me the most, was how willing he was to just let go. It scared me because it reminded me of Maxine, who was also just ready to go. And it struck me in this odd way that don't they see the beauty around them? Don't they see the life worth living? And it also struck me because it made me question, what did I see worth living, and would I end up like them, just ready to go? I don't want to go. I don't want to stop seeing the bright colors, even if they are as duller here than they were in Arcadia, those splashes. I don't want to forget. Because even the pain is refreshing in comparison to nothing. But he was at peace with it. And that was the thing I couldn't understand either. They're both at peace with this sort of thing. How could they be at peace with this? Is it because they know they're coming around again on the circle?
You're familiar with being stuck in a rut, right?
And Zoro sort of nods.
Some folks get stuck that way. The world bears down on them a little too hard, and instead of fighting back and stealing your reserve, they place all their bets that the next time around will be better.
I don't have a next time. And I don't want there to be a next time. Because I think in some respects, I was sort of thinking this before, but it sort of struck me more this way. It's a safety net. It's this idea that there's something to catch you. That, oh, things didn't work out this way. It was a wash. Might as well just clear out and see how the chips fall the next time.
How do you think the dreaming feels about that?
And he sort of pauses at that. And he goes, he's about to say something, but he goes, I'm going to save that answer for when I reach the end of my experience. Because we're going to discuss, because that's something that that's important at the end. All I will say at this moment is that I find it a tragedy.
Do you know why the Changeling Way was developed?
And he shakes his head.
The cold world for a bit there. Iron factories, steel machines, iron roads boring through mountains, so that gigantic machines could make the world smaller. Children dying in factories, being crushed to death because they were the ones small enough to run under machines. No matter how dark today's world may seem, there was a time that was darker. And we used to be a much more tenacious lot, scrappy, willing to put up a fight. People started mingling souls, letting the Fey soul sleep beside a human soul, and when that person died, the changeling way began. It was a way to ensure survival. I think at some point it's become a way for people to rest on their laurels.
I've seen enough people since I've gotten here resting on their laurels. I don't want to be one of them. In fact, I mean not to. But I think that's me skipping ahead a bit.
Please continue. You had a fight with Maurice. He was having heart problems.
And as I said, I was shocked and scared and afraid, and I realized a little after the fact I wanted to help him. It didn't matter what we were arguing about at the time. This is someone who needed help. But he didn't want my help. He didn't want anyone's help. He was ready to go. And I promised him that if I would keep that secret from the children on the council. He sort of smiles for a moment. But it still pained me because when I left there, I felt like I was walking away from someone who was so sad, so bitter, so old. And I realized I might never see him again. Not like that, at least. Not with what colors remained within him. And I thought to myself, and I said to him, I told him before I left, I hope I get to see you one more time. And you know how awful that was? To realize that I cared so much about this man who I was having an argument with that I didn't want him to go. And yet I had to.
So he's given up the fight.
And Charles nods. He's not gone yet. At least I don't think. I think he wants to make sure that Brooklyn's at least in a good enough position, but Charles sort of rubs his eyes. I don't know how much longer that's going to actually last. I don't think he can hold out for that. There's only so much you can breathe on a fire before the embers finally die. After that, I went to speak with the new governor of Brooklyn. There was a causality between those conversations. Oh, that was something else. That argument, I should say. Sorry, I have to go back to that just a little bit. The argument before it. You know what disgusts me? Absolutely disgusted me even before this. But I never felt such disgust or such hatred.
I imagine a great many things, but please tell me the specifics.
The Maurice was telling me about when the Arcadians came back and their war, and how they under a banner of peace and diplomacy, they ended them all permanently. Mad, savage dogs, just fucking disgraceful. Not even disgraceful, no, just there's no words. Though I can think of many words to describe the atrocity, but it wouldn't put a candle to what it was. It made me ashamed. It made me angry. It made me feel that all that anyone's ever going to look at me at is going to be like one of those fucking murderers. Not even murderers, no. Murderers is too kind of a word for those. He sort of stops and he shakes his head. I lost my cool. I got angry. I got extremely angry. Because here I was, here to talk to Maurice, to engage in conversation, to try and mend the wounds that had been mended, to find a way to move forward, and yet, right in my face, I have to be spat in the face of what happened the last time someone like me said diplomacy was the best way. That the thing I represented, the thing that I embodied, just so tarnished and just a tool to fall into something so vile and brutal. I was ashamed. I was angry. And I didn't ever want to be compared to any of those animals. And that sort of sparked it, a bit of the argument, and Maurice did say something, then to stop serving people like them.
Do you think you serve people like them?
I think I served a young boy who doesn't know how the world should work, who doesn't have tact. I think I chose to serve a count who wants to do what is right for people, but something that people might not realize is right. I think I've served someone where the answer is not going to be clear. And I want to make sure I can be there at the very least to try and move things in a direction for the better. I want things to move. I want things to change. I want things to be better.
Yeah, but how can you make something like the Knight of Iron Knives better?
I can't make that better. I can't change what happened then, much as I would like to. I wish I could just rewrite it, change the narrative, make it so that the commoners triumphed. They saw through it at the bare minimum. The commoners saw through the deceit, but that wouldn't be what I want. I would have liked a better narrative in which that talks of diplomacy was actually legitimate, that they sat down and that they came to understandings, that they realized that that the world was different, that this wasn't Arcadia anymore, that this wasn't just Earth anymore. Things had changed. The landscape for both had changed. And it'd be something to change, move forward. I can't change what happened in the past, though. I can only affect the now, and I can only move forward. So am I going to make the Knights of Iron Knives better? No. I can't make up for that. But what I can do is at least show that I'm not like them, and that I'm willing to talk, that I'm willing to work, and that I'm willing to bring about something better. What that better is, I don't know yet. There's still things too confusing right now. There's still things that the landscape keeps shifting, and I'm still trying to figure out my place in it all. But he raises a finger that my place in all also is something I think I'm going to save until the end. Regardless, after I had my talk with Maurice, I went to speak with Sam, the governor of Brooklyn. And I had gotten used to the fact that I had done this, he gestures to myself, and how people would have reacted around them, usually in awe or, like staring into the sun. I didn't expect someone to have a full-on panic attack or a breakdown. But I think I was just the final straw on everything else that had been happening to them. And, would have been very easy to capitalize upon that. It would have been frighteningly easy. But that wasn't why I was there. I was there to build relations. I was there to build ground that had been shorn away from the actions of from actions misinterpreted from what I advised.
He's kind of making an interesting, like an interested face. He reaches into like a cargo pocket and pulls out a pear, starts munching on it. Please continue. Pear?
I won't say no.
Reaches into his pocket and pulls out another pear.
And Charles takes it, and he takes a bite into it. At least one bite to be polite before he thinks about it for a moment. I realize two things. I know I keep jumping all over the place, but it's hard to keep a singular train of thought with this kind of thing. But I had hurt someone indirectly with my actions and plans, or, well, I had these plans, I had these goals in mind to try and what I thought would elevate people and give the opportunity for others to elevate as well. But because others either misinterpreted my intention or didn't quite get the memo with what I was telling them, they inadvertently started hurting others. Well, the first one was inadvertent, at least. And it was not my intention to hurt that individual. And for the first time, I actually felt remorse. Not for what I did or what I set out to do, but remorse that because of what I'd set out to do for this greater, grander goal, that somehow, through miscommunication, they got hurt in the end of it.
Can you provide details for this? Or?
Have you been seeing the blaze of the bale fires from the county?
Kind of thinks for a moment. Yeah.
I had suggested to at the time my lord of Manhattan that Manhattan was in need of stability. That everything in the political climate was turning heads and looking at Manhattan as a weak link. That was the only night of Manhattan, and something that large, you need more. You need something better to ground on. Not to mention, public opinion wasn't looking too well with the Ranters debacle and how the young lord had left his wedding before a strike that he couldn't possibly have been aware was going to happen. Although I had made sure that he and the guards were aware that the wedding was compromised. Regardless, I had suggested to the young lord that Manhattan was in need of needed to rise up from the ashes of the public opinions and to make it something else, something grander. So I proposed an idea of this alliance, a linking of the freeholds, of the remaining baronial freeholds. And eventually, as time went on, and the potential inclusion of commoner freeholds within it as well. I had anticipated that Brooklyn and Staten were very much content to stay where they were, but after the alliance had been would be made, the doors would remain open if they ever wanted to join it as well. A seat of unified strength, but at the time, Brooklyn needed to focus on its own efforts. It wanted to. That's at least the message I got. Still, the Lord and his Baroness had made an offer to grant a freehold to a puka by the name of Amber. And Amber didn't accept, but she said she would consider it. Not too long after, she was voted to be a councilwoman of the new democracy of Brooklyn. Now, offering a freehold to a council member becomes a conflict of interest,
to say the least.
So what should have happened was a polite withdrawal of that offer. I was not aware that the offer had been made. I was not aware that the offer still stood. And I had made sure that every one of my actions were being reported to the Baron. And so when we were ready to link, I heard no objections, no order to hold. We're still waiting on others.
Hey, put a pin in this real quick. I think my baby's awake, so I'm going to go give him a drink.
Cool. No worries.
Ooh.
One moment, I'll be back.
Mhm.
Now, where was I? Oh, yes. So I heard nothing. No word on the fact that the offer had been made. No word that we should wait to make sure that others were ready to join. Nothing. So this happens. And I'm presenting what has happened to the newly crowned count. And in comes Councilwoman Amber. Upset, rightfully so, that an offer that was standing that she was considering to try and open up for a embassy, which I still have my opinions on that, but it's neither here or there, was taken. Like this was an insult, that she had taken too long and now wasn't even was offered something and wasn't even given the proper due respect of having the offer withdrawn. And I had no idea. And I felt
Set up.
set up. I felt like I was getting the brunt for something that I was I was trying to do something that was supposed to be grand. I was supposed to be this, and yet in the end, somehow I was the one who had hurt someone. And I felt guilty. I felt bad. Not for what I had done. I did this, I fully believe, and I still fully believe that what I did was for the betterment of Manhattan and for the future betterment of the County of New Hope. I do not feel guilty about that. No, what I felt guilty about was the fact that even though I had no knowledge of what had happened, that this hurt someone, that I wouldn't call them a friend, but someone who had she was the only one who asked me if I was all right after Maxine died.
Why don't you call her a friend?
I don't know. Maybe I should, but I don't know.
Another bite of the pear.
I think it's more complicated than what I think. Because there's, when he sort of gestures at his body, he's like, there's things happening. A bit of fission that even the even this new perspective that you've given me still grates against itself. It's biology of the human desire versus my true essence and self. It's a confliction. I don't know if what I feel for Amber is truly genuine. Because I know for a fact it's one half is too red-blooded for me to think clearly. When I know that's not me. So it's hard when it comes to Amber on whether or not is she a friend? Do I really consider her to be a friend, or is it because red-blooded American Charles is having trouble keeping things in his pants?
He gives a sort of confused look at him. You can't be friends with attractive people. I'm sorry. No.
It's not that. He says that he sort of like rubs his hands. It's like he sort of pauses for a moment. He goes, I am not attracted to people. I'm not attracted to people in that way. Charles is. And it's confusing. Even now, even with this harmonious sort of this greater understanding I have of it, it's like I'm at war. Because I understand what Charles wants. I understand what he's desiring. But I can't give that. I can't do that. Does that make sense?
Not a lick. Might have prepare. But carry on.
Regardless, then. He sort of waves his hand aside. He goes, I felt bad for what had happened to Amber. And I was sorry. I really was. So later I speak with my lord, and we get into a heated argument. Seem to be getting into a lot of arguments these days. But once again, I begin to find that that there was only this half listening to what I was saying, where my suggestions were taken in certain parts and the other rest of it just sort of cast off to the side. In this idea that, no, this was supposed to be for everyone, when I specifically said the baronial freeholds. And how the people of Brooklyn were upset like they had been left out of this. So I told him, so perhaps it was the emotions that I was going through, but I essentially came down to this. Why are you concerned with the opinions of about what you do for your barony from the people of Brooklyn, who need to be worrying about their own things? They're new. They barely have a right to judge you on what you're doing when they haven't really set up certain things themselves. When there's people who were in former positions of power who are now essentially on the streets. I suggested to him that he should focus on building Manhattan up rather than and listening to the people of Manhattan, rather than worrying about the opinions of what Brooklyn thought he was doing for his barony. The people of Manhattan was his dominion, not Brooklyn.
Took a firm hand with him. How'd that go for you?
Well, he came around. And then he decided that my message of you should worry about the concerns of your own people and not that of Brooklyn meant spit in the face of Brooklyn. And I will admit I may have stated a few things to make an opinion of like why you should why are you concerned with your opinion? Why are you concerned with the opinions of Brooklyn when they're letting the former nobility, people who could probably help them in building their new empire, just be on the streets with basically kicked out of their homes? And I'll admit I suggested that perhaps we make an invitation to the former Knights of Brooklyn, since we are so lacking in staff here, and obviously they haven't had a place to go or been given opportunities. We should at least give them the opportunities. Instead, the Lord decides to make a cry from the parapet of an open declaration to all former nobility are welcome with it. All the former nobility of Brooklyn are welcome into the arms of Manhattan. And anyone who has issues with how Brooklyn is being handled are welcome as well. Another smack. Charles rubs his eyes. Once again, what I'm saying is being cherry-picked into the message they want to send, or what they feel they need to send. I had no idea he was going to make this speech from the parapet. If I had been even slightly aware of this idea, I probably would have stopped him.
Throwing yourself on him before he stood up to the mic, that sort of thing?
Or at least take the mic away, pull the cord out. But unfortunately, the damage is done. And once again, all my best intentions twisted and dashed. And that leads me to when I'm starting to go to the people of Brooklyn to hear their concerns of where the insult came from. How can we mend this? How can we, Manhattan, fix the damage we've done? And I come to the governor, and the governor is panicking and having a full panic attack because the pressure of all this is happening, and once again I felt guilty. Because once again, I was trying to do something for the betterment of people, and I had hurt this one, and this one I had hurt terribly. I'm sure there was a far more going on that I had no control over, the stress building up to get to that thing, but just my presence alone, being there, and my intent to just try and talk and try to figure these out, damaged things. And I stayed on the other side of the wall as I spoke to them. And I encouraged them. I built them up. Because I didn't want them to be damaged. I didn't want them to feel like they were nothing. I wanted them to be what they could only hope to be. I wanted them to be able to look me in the eye like a leader and say to my face what they believed. And I did. And they did. And I couldn't have been prouder. But there was something else that had went on during my time of talking with Sam. During that, I was encouraging them. I was playing therapist, but there was something different that time. I've played psychoanalyst, I've played therapist before, but this time there was something else in the mix. Compassion. And it wasn't until after that happened that I realized that that was what I had pushed forward. Compassion. I wanted something. I wanted a result. I wanted an end result. Yes, I still did. But how I did it, and what I put forward into it, was far different than I'd ever done before, and I had never felt more genuine than I did in that moment. Once again, backtracking stories. It's hard to keep track with all these emotions sometimes. You know, even before all that, I had met with Amber again. She was mad at me because she felt that somehow I had convinced the Baron to basically slap them all in the face. That wasn't my intention. And I let her work her ways to get the truth out of me. And I told her
Raises an eyebrow.
it's not that dirty. He sort of chuckles at that one. But she realized I meant what I said. That I wasn't the one, that wasn't my intention to hurt them or hurt her. And I hope in the future we'll meet and we'll build bridges towards something greater. And that might not be for a while now.
Do you have any reason to think that you would deliberately hurt her?
Probably because I'm a manipulative bastard.
Ah. So the chickens came home to roost.
Yes, with the fox in the hen house. He sort of chuckles at that.
Are you the fox in this metaphor?
I'm honestly not sure anymore. But I don't know, it just seemed funny. Something else I never done was really laugh. That was last night, actually, the first time I really, really laughed. You know, I kept laughing so much I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop. And you know, it scared me, but it was so scary that I couldn't stop laughing that I just kept laughing. This month I've been afraid. I've been angry. I've been sad. I felt regret. I felt guilt. I felt pride, not in myself, but in another person. And you know, the oddest thing is that despite feeling these things and being able to recognize them and do all this, I still don't fully understand. But I think I understand something better now. I understand what they are. How they can build us. How they can cripple us and destroy us. But more importantly, I think I understand that they're what makes us live. In some part, at least, some piece of the puzzle. It's what I was writing in there, and I wasn't just a dream journal. I wasn't just a dream journal, so to speak, when I was writing all my emotions, all those feelings. Feel free to have fun with the 30 pages of my venting at Sebastian. But last night, or was it this morning? I don't remember. I was in a fever as I was pulling everything together. And it struck me. These feelings, these emotions, these things within us, maybe I don't understand them. But it doesn't mean now that I don't appreciate them and value them. I've laughed, pure laughter, something I never would have done before. I felt pride in another person, true pride. I felt grief and regret. I felt fear. I was trapped in a nightmare. And these last several nights have been nothing but nightmares. The same one over and over again, in which I see myself as I once was, this Duke of Arcadia, this pinnacle of pure fairy. As I cut down those things that are corrupted and twisted and polluted. And then in the end, I am embraced by Charles himself, and I become just as polluted as the rest, and I realize what I have done, who I've hurt, and the promises that I have made that have shaped me and that I have broken. And it all came crashing together in the end. I'm not the Carraris I was.
Jesus, sorry. Minor heart attack. The game of is that fireworks or a gun is going off on my suburb. So,
yay! The answer is yes, Carol. The answer is yes.
I hate July. All right.
But anyway, sorry, back to it. And it was when I came together. I'm not the Carraris I was when I left Arcadia. I've changed quite a bit. And it was in that moment where I was changing that I realized this change was something more. And for the second time since I've come here, to this place, I felt the dreaming move through me again. And you know what I felt? I felt that it was okay that I was honoring what I was, holding on in some degree to what I am, but I was doing the right thing in moving forward and changing. And that I was on the right path to something greater, something bigger than I ever was, something more important. And I think I realized what it was. I am not living. I'm not living because I didn't feel like I had a purpose. You can't live without a purpose, without something to strive for, without something to work for. And the dreaming was pushing me to show that I'm on the path to something purposeful, something worth living for. He sort of closes his eyes. So no, this was never about me really remembering how to sing the songs of the moon or to speak the words that turn waterfalls to gold or to shape the world with language. That came because it was part of me honoring and remembering who I was, but accepting the fact that I need to move forward and to find a purpose. That's what Shoshain is, isn't it? It's not immortality, that's just a byproduct. It's a purpose.
He gives a bit of a shrug. No, it's absolutely all about the immortality. He gives like a mischievous grin as he puts the pit of the hair in its other cargo pocket. He holds out his hand. If you're done with that, I'll take it back.
Oh, sorry. He says as he just one more bite, and he takes a bite and he hands over the rest to him.
Guzzlewig will absolutely have my ass if I leave food around. I'm sure you understand.
Charles just nods.
No, it's the dreaming has a purpose for all of us. There's stories that simplify things, oh, well, that dog puka exists because a man dreamed of his best friend, which was a dog, or that eagle puka exists because a human envied flight, and so therefore all bird puka exists. But that's a broad and overly simplistic view of what we are. No one was born from a broad and general dream of things. We're all a very specific dream. We all have a very specific purpose. Broad and general is, it's banal. It wears away the fine details of a sculpture until all you see is a massive hunk of. He looks at Charles's marble massage, and it says clay. We are specific stories. We are specific wants and desires, motivations. We may be generally similar, some of us. The she, all noble. The Ishu, all wander. The Puka, all whatever it is they're doing. But they all have a specific dream. When you realize what your purpose is, the dreaming moves through you. That cycle that they go through, birth and rebirth and rebirth and rebirth. That's a byproduct. And it's wearing away at them. We are creatures of dreams. We are here to inspire, to move the destiny of the world. And it's all been muddied. And it wasn't the shattering or the accordance war that muddied it. It was muddied. It was muddied before the first Fae mingled with a human soul. Because it looked at humanity as something to be possessed, as opposed to the realization of another dream. Humanity can achieve great things, Heraris. And it's our job to push them to envision those great things. Whether it be fear or inspiration, grandeur or demolition. Humanity creates grandeur when we inspire them, when we do our job. And because they become greater, their dreams become greater, and we become greater. What they dream shapes us. It's important to respect this body that you're in. Know who it is. Embrace it. You gestured to yourself earlier, this thing you've done to yourself. Why did you do it?
And Charles sort of sighs. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was being ripped apart. I was desperate. I needed a place to shield myself as the world was literally ripping me to bits. And I went for the first light I saw. like some candle in the window saying sanctuary. And I went in and I found there was only room for one. At least that's what I thought at the time. So I destroyed it. Because I was so desperate to live that it didn't matter what I did to make it happen. And then I realized what I had done was put myself into a body that at the time disgusted me. And I'm not going to say there's certain things that still don't bother me about it. Those biological reactions whenever I'm around Amber.
Redheaded, yes.
And for a long time, I despised Charles. I despised the fact, even though I liked to pretend to be him, I'd use his name around there because, it was fun to play human. It was fun to walk around in the skin suit, pretend to be human. But it was all just a fun game, this body that I am inhabiting in, something to distract me from the fact that I was disgusted by it. I thought at the time that humans were these things that had all this potential and yet wasted it. And that they could dream something up as grand as myself, or something as loud and screaming for liberty as William Black. Something as vexing and wondrous as Amber. And they were so blind to it. But this month changed a lot of things. There was something else I realized. I was talking to someone, learning to drive, if you would believe it.
A very useful tool here in New York City.
But I was talking to them, and it came to the conversation about Charles's family. More specifically, his sister. Before I took over Charles, they were planning on going to South Africa together. She was so excited because her baby brother was finally going to join her on one of her adventures. And it was that same day that I inhabited the body that I got the phone call asking if we were ready to go, and I said I couldn't. I was so confused. I was unable to really comprehend what was going on. But for the first time, I was looking back at that memory, and I realized how hurt she was. And I realized how hurt Charles was. And what I had taken from him. I didn't just take a body to protect myself from the ravages of cold, iron, decay. I took a life. And for the first time, I was really being confronted with that. I took his life. I took his potential. I took his hopes. I took his dreams. I took everything and devoured them just so that I could live.
Well, you know that they say you are what you eat.
You know, at first I thought he was gone. I thought he was completely devoured and taken away, but I see him sometimes in the mirror. I hear him sometimes in my head. And I heard him more clearly than ever before when I finished writing that down. He says he stares at the book. You know what he said to me?
I don't, but please continue.
Make my life matter. Make the life that you took from me matter.
I guess the question is, what matters?
That is the question. Is it what I think matters or what Charles thinks matters?
See, there we go down to the narrowing and broadening and missing the grand scheme of things. If it only matters to one person, it doesn't matter. The world is vast, the dreaming more so. Who is one compared to everything? People like to play these little manipulative games, courts, your seeming, your kith. They put everything into these little camps, and then they try to grow the camp because they realize if it's just one person, it doesn't matter. But what they don't realize is that it doesn't matter unless it's everything. It's a very tall order. Obeying the will of the dreaming. Because it isn't what matters to you or what matters to Charles. Though you do have to learn to find a way to mesh those things. It is about looking at the grand picture. Beyond Seelie, beyond Unsilly, beyond Ileal or Danan or Bowman or Fiona, any of the other houses that act like their politics and how things are governed are more important than what's happening. You feel it when you go out into the gray world, that cold chill. People talk about disbelief as though it's something so simple out of a storybook. that if you just clap your hands, it'll remedy this ill feeling each and every one of us have in our guts. If they don't believe in us, if we fade from existence, what happens? What happens if you fade from existence? What happens when any of us fade from existence? We have to change the story. Old ones are being forgotten every day. And allowing ourselves to rest on our laurels in this changeling way, this cycle of rebirth. It's just covering our eyes to the problem.
Charles walks up to him. And it's not like a threatening walk up to him. It's more somewhat reverential in a way, actually. Even though he's probably taller than Dice. And he looks at him. I am stories. I'm every word written in one. I'm every speech, for good or ill. I'm every scream from a parapet. I'm every crying confession in a church. I'm language and communication. I'm these things that build society. If I go, what happens to them? I can't imagine that. And I don't want to imagine that. Say the story needs to be changed. Stories change. Language changes. Ideas and beliefs change. But you say there's a bigger picture. And I think I've only begun to glimpse it. How do I get to see the rest?
You need to open your eyes. Stop hiding behind these things that make you feel comfortable and realize what exactly is going on in the world around you. Not just courtly politics and freeholds and the company of a lovely fox. Look beyond at those people suffering, those people benefiting from suffering. All of them have a story to how they got there. But because we limit our worldview to the things that will make us most comfortable in that moment, when it comes time to look at those individuals, we paint them with as few words as possible. We don't have their story. So we call them bum, or old man, or young woman, or priest, or just simple words. But that's not a story. That's not even a title. You have to step back and let that shock hit you so that you will look at the story. If you're numb to it, how can you see it?
There's a long silence as Charles takes that in. You know, I think you said I'm taking things, I think you're saying that I'm taking certain things for comfort, for granted. And you know, you may be right. I did this, he says to myself, because I lost someone and because I wasn't powerful enough to protect them. Because it made me feel comfortable, made me feel grand and strong again. They stopped my aging because I was so frightened and scared when they stopped at once and I felt myself dying again. And because I was so sad, because I was so miserable and felt despondent and without a place in the world, he put his hand over his heart. They put something inside me so that I would be happy. But what you're saying is that this is making me blind to the rest of what's going on.
How can you connect with the rest of the world if you aren't even experiencing it?
He puts his hand on that. It's hard for a moment. And the glow fades. That surreal beauty of his dies down. He's still something striking to look at. But he's diminished. He's not in the grandeur he once was.
Need help with the rest of it?
Give me... Let me make my peace with what she gave me. And then yes.
Should probably step out of the library. I am pretty sure this I'm pretty sure if I were to ignite anything in here, I would be let out by my ear. I think there's a trod nearby.
Charles nods and lead the way.
And he leads past the stacks of books, past the walls of Taranar, but still within the realm of the freehold, into the gardens. He walks up to a strange-looking bush, out of place from the rest of the hedge, and whispers a word. It parts. There before you is the silver path. Moonlight shining down, making it bright, making it gleam. And Dice gestures. After you.
And Charles takes a deep breath for just a moment. And he almost like caresses his own cheek for just a moment. And he mutters under his breath, "This would be so much easier if I knew your true name. Thank you, Maxine. But if I'm going to meet you, it's going to have to be without this." And he puts his hand over his heart. "You saw I was sad, and you decided to make me happy. You made me very happy, Maxine. But I need to nurture that happiness on my own. I need to find my own joy." That he opens those stained glass window eyes, and he takes the steps upon the silver path.
Dice follows, and then sort of moves ahead, grabbing a couple of branches along the way, some from the hedge, some from branches that have fallen across the path. And he grabs like twine out of his pocket. He makes like a very quick, even for him, like arch of wood, little twigs. He grabs a box of matches from his pocket and he looks at Charles. "I hope you made your peace because this isn't going to burn long." And he strikes the match. He roll his crack.
Pyretics, yeah.
That's not what it is. Oh, that's enough to burn it all away. So.
Yeah. And so the arch ignites, and there's only one split second, one very split second. But then the resolve is set, because there's no going back now. And he passes through, and the heat shrivels and cracks away at the magic. That plant of hope shrivels and burns and desiccates into a husk away as it goes. Even this newfound balance of emotions, this all goes away. And Charles stumbles, and he falls to his knees on the silver path for a moment, as for the first time in months, he's feeling time move again, flow again, his body dying again. And even though he's not within the world of banality or gray, still is in every nerve, in his veins, and every breath is just a reminder that it could be the last. But now he's not running from the feeling. Now he's not trying desperately to cling to something. Now he knows. He either does this, or that's the end. Every breath is going to matter.
Dice sort of walks over to him, puts a hand on his shoulder. Take a moment and use these uncomfortable feelings to connect. Realize that it's these little things that everyone is experiencing. And find your place in the world.
Charles just nods. It's still too overwhelming for him to be able to speak right now, but he nods. He closes his eyes. And for just a moment, as he's just breathing, he's just feeling. And even though those emotions are gone, that seed of happiness is gone. There's something within him. Small something else. For the first time. Hope. And a drive.
Here's where we end our scene. Thank you, players, for playing. Thank you, watchers, for watching. And we'll see you next time.